I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang, or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. I'm Jim Chapman, and today we are starting a new series. It's going to be covering the phenomenon known as Hybristophilia. Now, these days, Hybristophilia is becoming a major problem, especially the last few years, but it's actually been an issue pretty much forever. So the first question you might be asking is, what is Hybristophilia? Well, the official definition, according to Webster, is that Hybristophilia is a paraphilia involving sexual interest in and attraction to those who commit crimes. In layman's terms, it means there's a sexual attraction to bad boys or bad girls, and it's commonly referred to as Bonnie and Clyde syndrome for obvious reasons. Now, one of the most famous examples, or infamous, I should say, of Hybristophilia is the large number of women that were attracted to Ted Bundy after his arrest. He drew scores of women at the courtrooms. They just jam-packed it during his trials each day. And they weren't ashamed or thought it was weird that they were there talking about how hot they found this fucking serial killer. Bundy allegedly received hundreds of love letters from women while he was incarcerated, and actually married a woman by the name of Carol Ann Boone, who he had met while both were working in Washington. But he proposed to her in the middle of the proceedings of his trial while Boone was on the witness stand. Listen to this.
Carol, you want to marry me?
Yes.
And I want to marry you?
Yes.
And I do want to marry you.
He said you did.
Now, Boone did give birth to a daughter who many believe Bundy had fathered. Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson, even the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, had hundreds of admirers who were sexually attracted to them. And it's not limited to women, but it's much more common, it seems. So, in most cases, this is harmless. It's love letters, etc., to prisoners. But what if it's a correctional officer, like the story we covered with Vicky White? Or even worse, what if it's the warden's wife? And that's exactly the story I'm bringing you today. I'm going to tell you the details of the crazy case involving Bobbi Parker and Randolph Dial. So you can't start this story without starting at the beginning, and a guy by the name of Kelly Dean Hogan. Now, Kelly was born in 1953 in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and he had a typical family life you would expect growing up. He had a brother, a sister, and to keep him busy, his parents enrolled him in karate school at a young age, and he absolutely fell in love with the sport. Really took to it. He was really good at it, and by the time he enrolled in college, he started teaching it as well. Now, people absolutely loved Kelly and his teaching style, and the fact that he was a third-degree black belt with a ton of experience helped draw students in. And Kelly wasn't just athletic. He was also smart. And in short order, very short order, he graduates from Oklahoma State University with a degree in psychology. Now, after graduation, he continued teaching at his instructor's dojo. And after about 10 years of teaching, which incidentally was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he got somewhat of a bad taste in his mouth. He was ambitious. And most of the students who took classes there did so because Kelly was the instructor. He was very well liked. He specialized in teaching children. He had a lot of patience. He explained things extremely well so they could understand. And it was in 1978 that he decided he was going to go ahead and take his shot, be a business owner. He goes out and he opens his own karate school. Now, this did create a major problem with the person he was working for, because when Kelly left and opened what was known as Kelly Hogan's International Taekwondo Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a lot of students left with him. And his former boss, let's just say he didn't like that at all. So during all this, he also got married to his wife, Denise. And at this point in time, life was good. He's a business owner. He's making money. He's got a ton of students. Just couldn't be happier. And the next several years was much of the same. Kelly Hogan was growing his business. He was really making a name for himself in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. If you were looking to take Taekwondo, that's who you wanted to take it from. From all accounts, he was just a good dude, which is why it came to such a shock to the entire Tulsa community on September 16th of 1981 when Kelly Dean Hogan was killed, shot once in the chest at his home at 10:30 p.m. that night. So Hogan and his wife, they had been out to eat. They just returned home and the doorbell rings. Now, according to his wife, it appeared that Hogan had been arguing with a man in a blue business suit at that door when the shooting occurred. Denise Hogan said she overheard her husband arguing over the whereabouts of a woman named Patty Thomas. The shooter was asking Kelly where she was, saying she had a karate class earlier that day with Hogan. Kelly Hogan, however, he didn't know what the hell this guy was talking about. The gunman then said to Hogan that he knew she was there, meaning at Hogan's karate studio. Kelly Hogan still continuing to insist at that doorway that he had no idea what this guy was talking about. The guy then pulls a .380 pistol and shoots him. Hogan, now shot, runs from the doorway through the house and collapses in the garage and dies. Now, everyone that knew Kelly Hogan, they knew there was no way he was having an affair. This would have been totally out of character for this guy. And it's important to note that police did check the schedule of that karate studio, and no one by the name of Patty Thomas was scheduled for karate classes ever at that school. So on September 19th of 1981, Kelly Hogan is buried at Ridgelawn Cemetery in Collinsville, Oklahoma. 10 days later, on September 29th of 1981, police release a drawing of the suspect in that murder. The man was described as 35 to 40, white male, light brown hair, and about 6 feet tall with a pudgy build. He was wearing a 3-piece suit, a black belt with a gold buckle, and a navy blue tie. And it was about that point that police offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to that suspect. Then, on October 1st of 1981, just a few weeks after Kelly's murder, a guy by the name of Gary Edwards, who was 34, and he lived in Manford, Oklahoma, he was named as a suspect. At the time, Edwards was also being chased by U.S. Marshals for violating his parole by issuing worthless checks. Not a good guy. And when I was looking through the research of this one, this guy had several aliases, but one of them really stuck out to me. James Bond was one of his aliases. I mean, maybe not the best fake name to use if you're going to go on the run, but whatever. Now, it was interesting that Edwards not only closely matched the composite drawing of the killer, but he was also said to have been hanging out around Kelly's karate studio just a few hours prior to the murder. So it took 9 months to finally track this guy down. But on July of 1992, police catch up with him and Gary Edwards is questioned. However, it was during this questioning that police all but removed his name from consideration as a suspect. And that makes me think maybe he had an alibi that was foolproof. Then, on the same month, in July of 1982, an anonymous donor offers $10,000 for the arrest and conviction of Kelly Hogan's killer, which that was significant. That's about $33,000 in today's money. The donor placed a deadline of midnight on October 15th of 1982 in order to collect that reward. He's hoping the deadline would create a bit of urgency, but it didn't. The case pretty much grows cold as ice. That is until 1986, when Randolph Dial walked up to authorities in Las Vegas and confesses to shooting and killing Kelly Hogan. So who the heck was Randolph Dial? Well, Dial was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1944, and unlike Kelly Hogan, who had a structured, all-American upbringing, Dial's childhood was not nearly as carefree. His parents divorced when Dial was just 3 years old, and growing up was more of a struggle, especially financially. But Dial had several things going for him. He was very talented, an extremely talented sculptor, an artist, and that was noticed in Dial at an early age. He also had a magnetic personality and was described more than once as having a unique presence when he walked into a room and really knew how to talk to people. And he was extremely smart. Some people say genius level smart. Dial had a master's degree in art, and at 26, he became a teacher for Tulsa Public Schools, teaching at Carver Middle School, but it was a short stint. He only taught for 1 year, and he kind of got bored with it. He started working as a sculptor in the Tulsa area, as well as Las Vegas, where he traveled often. And he was such an amazing sculptor, in fact, that he became very sought after, so much so that later in 1982, one of his pieces was featured on J.R. Ewing's desk for the entire run of the series known as Dallas. It was a sculpture of an oil rig. And even today, there's a piece at Walt Disney World's Epcot Center featuring Randolph Dial's work. His pieces back then sold for around $2,500 each, which is nearly $18,000 in today's money. Now, at some point, Randolph Dial gets married to Christina Dial, but he divorces her in 1978. And then in 1979, Dial marries Mary Catherine Dial, who he met during his job working as a goldsmith in Tulsa. And Dial had developed a problem during all this time. He was a severe alcoholic. His drinking problem was so severe, in fact, that between 1979 and 1981, a Tulsa couple who hired him to do some work for them at their art shop said he routinely failed to show up for work because he was drunk, just couldn't make it. It was affecting his livelihood now. Mary Catherine had a daughter from a previous relationship, and together they had a second daughter. But they divorced in 1983 after Dial meets another woman. After that woman's father introduces her to Dial at an AA meeting. Her name was Robin. They get married in 1983, and there's some dispute as to whether he and Mary Catherine were even legally divorced when he marries this other woman. But 1983 did seem to be a good year for Dial. A 13-piece bronze sculpture he made depicting the life of Jesus sold for the highest amount he had ever received for his work. A newspaper article even covered it and said that Dial had made efforts to save the life of a 2-year-old child in Shreveport, Louisiana, who needed a liver transplant by using part of the proceeds from that sale. So a lot of people thought Dial was a good guy, but not everybody. In fact, Dial was a con man. Many of those who knew him at this time described him as cocky, arrogant, and pretty much full of shit. And it also came out that he had mafia ties. Dial's name emerged in a Tulsa federal trial for the prosecution of Jack Michael King, who allegedly had ties to a Kansas City, Missouri organized crime family. King was convicted on several charges, including explosives. And according to witnesses, King was going to use car bombs to collect on murder contracts in the crime family. One of those was an $8,000 contract supposedly he hired Dial to fill. Dial was supposed to testify at the trial against King, but for unexplained reasons, his name was withdrawn as a witness and he disappeared. So in July of 1985, Randolph and Robin Dial moved to Las Vegas, where they were always in financial trouble and lived in some really bad parts of town. Dial was also severely depressed. He stayed drunk for days on end at this time. In March of 1986, the Dials have a baby. And so this kind of lights a fire under Randolph Dial's ass. And he finds some work. He starts painting houses, and he was earning some money with his sculpting, but nothing serious. And Robin Dial would say later on that her husband was in good spirits until the news hit about a nuclear meltdown at Chernobyl. Now, for some reason, this accident affected Dial and basically threw him into a state of depression like never before. She said shortly thereafter that Dial disappeared for several days, and she didn't hear from him again until he called her from the Clark County Jail on May 1st of 1986. And let me tell you what happened. So on that day, May 1st of 1986, a drunk Randolph Dial walks up to a uniformed police officer at a convenience store, and he tells that officer that he murdered karate instructor Kelly Hogan. So the Las Vegas Police Department, they take him in, and they call the Tulsa Police Department, and they inform those guys that, hey, we got a man in custody, and he claims to have killed somebody named Kelly Hogan. Do you know anything about this? And a guy named Sergeant Rick Ross and Corporal H.C. Miller, they say, hell yeah, we know about this. They fly to Las Vegas and they interview Dial over a 5-day period. So Dial had told police that a phone call was made to Hogan in which a woman who turned out to be Mary Catherine Dial called to set up an appointment with Hogan at his karate center. Now, according to Dial, the call was a pre-planned event in order to figure out the karate instructor's schedule. You might be shocked that Mary Catherine was even tied into this. Well, Dial lied to her, obviously. He told her that a mutual friend named Abdullah had hired Dial to just bust up Hogan, beat him up, basically. And she was not aware he was going to kill Dial. So after Hogan's murder, Mary Catherine said that Dial had suddenly, out of the blue, started flashing a substantial amount of money. According to Dial, he was paid $5,000 for the hit, and he told police that he confessed to the murder because he was afraid to be killed by the mafia. So on May 6th of 1986, he's officially charged with first-degree murder in the death of Kelly Hogan and is held without bond in that Las Vegas jail. So police, hearing all of this mafia talk, they were very interested in arresting this Abdullah guy. And Dial, he was very interested in getting a lighter sentence. So less than 2 weeks after his arrest, Randolph Dial is released from jail and was equipped with a wireless microphone and under the supervision of law enforcement. And the whole point there was to see if he could get some incriminating information out of Abdullah. Long story short, there was no Abdullah that anybody could find. It came out later on, Dial was actually hired by a man who took classes from Kelly Hogan and got pissed after he was corrected and kind of embarrassed in class. So he pays Dial to kill Kelly Hogan. On August 11th of 1986, Dial pleads guilty to the murder of Kelly Hogan, and he's sentenced to life in prison. And in a shocking turn of events, just months after Dial is sentenced to prison, Mary Catherine Dial, his second wife, who made that phone call to the karate instructor claiming to be a female interested in classes, she is shot and killed in her home. And police speculated it was in retribution for the murder of Kelly Hogan. So while Randolph Dial is in jail, he gets sued civilly by the family of Kelly Hogan. Remember, Dial's a very talented artist, and with all that time to just do time in prison, he could hammer out a massive amount of sculptures. And they do win a civil case for over $1 million. But as you might imagine, they never receive a dime. But Dial is hammering out sculptures as predicted. And while an inmate at Connor Correctional Center, he was featured in an article about working on his art in prison. He created an actual life-size sculpture of Mary Magdalene. And that statue was featured at the State Capitol Prison's art show, and it was estimated to be valued at over $100,000. But Kelly Hogan's family never got that money. So Randolph Dial, he's living the prison life, right? He's becoming very popular, actually, not only on the inside, but on the outside of the walls of the prison because of how good his art is. And on May 21st of 1991, Dial gets moved to the medium security portion of Oklahoma State Reformatory. Spokesman Josh McCurdy, who was an assistant to the warden, a guy by the name of Jack Calley, said that Dial had painted murals all over the place. Quote, when we closed down one of the cell houses, we sheetrocked the walls and he put murals on them. There were 5 murals in all, and they featured the official patches of the Department of Corrections and the Reformatory, an Oklahoma State Territory map, a 1910 oil rig, a wheat field, a farmhouse, and even a barn. On February of 1994, something kind of unprecedented happens for a murderer. Dial actually gets moved to the minimum security portion of the Oklahoma State Reformatory. That never happens when you're a violent, convicted murderer, right? But he does. He gets moved, and that speaks to how smooth a talker and how comfortable Dial made people. Now, when asked about it, officials said he was eligible for a minimum security status, even though he was serving a life sentence for murder. Officials said you must do 20% of 45 years, and then it's possible to be moved to a lighter security unit. And 20% of 45 years, y'all, would be 9 years. They just didn't see Dial as a threat. As I told you at the start, he was charming, fast talker, smart. So imagine the shock. Imagine the shock when on August 30th of 1994, Dial escapes Oklahoma State Reformatory with Bobbi Parker, who is none other than Deputy Warden Randy Parker's wife. Bobbi Parker and her husband, Randy Parker. They lived right next to the Oklahoma State Reformatory, along with the couple's two daughters. And their daughters at the time were ages 8 and 10. Dial had been doing a lot of work with his art for the prison. And as crazy as it sounds, he built up a lot of trust. Now, for his type of work, you need a kiln. And it just so happened that the Parkers at their home had a kiln. And not only that, Bobbi Parker was head of the art program that Dial was kind of the star of, right? Bobbi Parker herself was very into ceramics, which is why they had that kiln. And it wasn't long before Randolph Dial was working in the garage of the Parker's residence doing his art. And Dial became a daily fixture at the Parker's home. Bobbi Parker in particular volunteered often to help Dial and spent a lot of time alone in that garage with Dial. So on the morning of August 30th of 1994, Randy Parker, he leaves for work as usual, and he saw Dial working in the garage, walked by him, said hello, and took off to work. When he returned to the house that afternoon, Parker wasn't there. She had left a note saying she had gone shopping, so nothing really seemed off to Deputy Warden Parker. It wasn't until that evening that he was like, what the fuck? She still ain't back. Randy realized he hadn't laid eyes on Dial or his wife since early that morning, and this is the time before cell phones were prevalent, y'all. It wasn't like he could just say, let me text my wife and see where she's at, or check Life 360, or even call her on the phone. She just vanished. So Randy Parker contacts one of the correctional officers, and he says, hey, go check Randolph Dial's cell and ask him if he knows where the hell my wife is. He's hoping that maybe his wife mentioned something to Dial, or maybe he had a sixth sense. Regardless, the officer checks, and it is discovered that Dial was not there. It was also at that moment that the warden realized that not only had Dial escaped, but he had abducted Bobbi Parker in the process. So it was at this point that all hell breaks loose. And a spokesman for the prison, a guy by the name of Jerry Massey, he says to reporters, we think there's a possible hostage situation in that the wife of the deputy warden is also missing. Bobbi Parker, who was 32, was wife of Deputy Warden Randy Parker, and she was last heard from about noon when she left a message with her husband's secretary saying she was going shopping. Her van was also missing, a 1990 red Plymouth Voyager minivan. So that was the statement that came out. Now, at the time of the escape, Bobbi Parker was in the middle of planning a fall carnival at the local First United Methodist Church. And another spokesman, Josh McCurdy, he came out and he said, we've got no sightings at all. Authorities were unable to confirm that a van seen in a neighboring county about 8 p.m. that evening matched the one believed used in Dial's escape. You know, you get all these people calling as soon as they hear something, and everything all of a sudden looks like a minivan. Then around the same time, authorities were trying to confirm that van, Bobbi Parker herself actually telephones her mother, Clara Klein, who lived in Kansas, at about 8 p.m. that evening, and she asked her to tell her children that she was all right and she would be home soon. When her mother tried to get more information, Bobbi started crying and the phone hangs up. So authorities behind the scene, they are considering the possibility that Bobbi Parker is Dial's hostage, but also considering the possibility that Bobbi Parker ran away with Dial. And the crazy thing that came out once shit hit the fan was that the prison warden, Jack Cowley, said Dial was noted missing from every head count, which they performed head counts every 2 hours, beginning at 11 a.m. Now, he was not confirmed missing until almost 9 o'clock, when Parker's husband had that CO go check on that cell. Callie said, I don't think he was overlooked. It's possible that somebody assumed that because Dial works for the deputy warden, he's okay. Dial was assigned as a groundskeeper at the warden's home on the prison grounds. He had a job for about 2 months doing that. Callie described Dial as a model inmate and was a good risk for trustee status. Well, that's what he thought. So the FBI also joined in the search for Dial and Parker, and it's primarily because of the presumption that Dial may have crossed state lines with Parker. The FBI asked the public to watch for Dial. He was described as a white male, 5'9", 150 pounds, brown eyes, and gray hair. His front teeth are missing, and he has a small scar under his chin and a round scar on his left calf. Bobbi Parker was described as a white female, 5'5", 120 pounds, shoulder-length auburn hair, and green eyes. She was last seen wearing a black blouse and black pants. Now, the head warden, Jack Callie, he suspected that Dial may have developed somewhat of an affection for Parker and kidnapped her when she spurned his advances. He said, Dial can be a very obsessive person. He obsessed over his artwork. He obsessed over criticism of his art. And I think what could have happened is that he may have become obsessed with her. So, in order to tamper down those thoughts that Parker may have assisted Randolph Dial, corrections spokesman Jerry Massey came out again and said that officials were convinced that Parker was an unwilling captive. Authorities speculated that Dial hid in the back of Parker's minivan when Bobbi left for that planned shopping trip. And there were a lot of things that would make you think this. Everything in her life was a bunch of stuff I have to do next week, right? She had made previous arrangements for her and her husband to attend a prison radio event at the end of the week. And if you're planning on escaping with somebody, why would you do that? She didn't take any clothing or other items from her house. Everything was still there. You might take some of that stuff if you were planning on running off with someone in prison. Head Warden Callie also noted that Dial had become close with the Parker family. He commented that Dial had told him several times that the Parker family was like the family he never had. Now, at the time of his escape, Dial had about $300 in his prison bank account, but told someone that he had a secret bank account in Las Vegas. Now, Randolph Dial was known as a pathological liar, so whether that was true or not remained to be seen, but what was certain was that Bobbi Parker was missing, and Randolph Dial had her. On September 1st of 1994, Bobbi's minivan is found by the Wichita Falls, Texas Police Department in a Hobby Lobby parking lot of all places. FBI spokesman Dan Vogel said the van was found around 1:30 p.m. that day, and it also came out that Bobbi had made a second phone call to a friend. Bobbi told her friend that she was okay, everything would be over soon, and she began crying again before the call was disconnected. Now, that call only lasted about 15 seconds. Spokesman Josh McCurdy said it was the same type of message as the call to her mother. She told her friend not to interrupt. She only had 15 seconds, but she was all right, and it was going to be over soon. Warden Callie said, "We were just very excited when we heard about the call because that means she was still alive." Police believe the call was made after Dial ditched that van in Wichita Falls, Kansas. And of course, they impound that van and examine it for evidence. But the only thing they found in that van was an empty pack of cigarettes from the same brand that Randolph Dial smoked. So police are looking everywhere for this guy. And on September 6th of 1994, a sheriff by the name of Andy Sellers comes out and he wanted to speak to how dangerous that Randolph Dial was. He said he was once a friend of Dial's. He gave an interview to reporters discussing his reluctance to see Dial again. He said that Dial previously vowed that should he ever escape from prison, he would return to kill the sheriff. The sheriff went on to say, "I watch my back now. You never know. He's a smart man." So Sellers met Dial when he was working as an officer and responded to a domestic complaint at Dial's house way back in 1982. Once that dispute was settled, Dial approached Sellers and talked about his work as a sculptor. Sellers said, "I befriended him and helped him. He didn't have a vehicle, so I gave him a ride to Tulsa a time or two." And Sellers said he gave Dial his final ride around 1984 or 1985 when Dial left his second wife, Mary Catherine, and headed to Las Vegas. Before they parted ways, Sellers said Dial gave him a John Wayne rifle to sell and asked him to give the money to Mary Catherine. So the sheriff sells a rifle, and he said he kept $20 for himself. But the sheriff said that Dial was unhappy with the sale of the rifle. And as Dial began to serve his life sentence for murder, he had a message for Sellers. Sellers said before he was taken to prison, he said if I ever got loose, he was going to come back and kill me. And he added that after Dial went to prison, he called the sheriff wanting to know if the sheriff had any idea who killed Mary Catherine. And that was the last time that he talked to Dial. On September 7th of 1994, the next day, inmates and staff at the prison held hands and they prayed together. It was about 1:30 p.m. and it was about a week since Parker disappeared with Dial. They all prayed for Parker's safe return, and the warden said, "We're just hoping now that she's alive. That's our concern. If we don't hear from them for several days, then that's not good." Callie added, "Nobody's considering or even willing to consider that she's anything but an unwilling hostage. Until they come back, I wouldn't even want to ponder that." Bobbi's husband, Randy Parker, returned to work about a week after her disappearance. The couple's two daughters had also returned to elementary school. Callie, the warden, said that Randy Parker is as upbeat as he can be while anxiously waiting to hear about another phone call from his wife. And the warden said, "We're all just sort of sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for something to happen. It may turn out that I'm surprised and she's released early, but we're preparing for this to be a long, drawn-out deal." Then, on September 16th of 1994, a film crew from the television show America's Most Wanted shows up, and they actually record an episode, but they delay the airing because the producers said that they were still checking out rumors Bobbi Parker was not kidnapped. A spokesman for the show in New York City, he denied that claim, though. He said the show was delayed because a more urgent program needed to be aired. Now, by October 2nd of 1994, the FBI was struggling to locate Dial. Reports received by tipsters, they were flooding in with spottings of Dial all over the place. New Mexico, Arizona. But as I said, this is common. A very high percentage of those don't pan out, and it's more or less the public's paranoia in many cases that plays tricks on them. So by November of 1994, Randy Parker and his two young daughters, they're attempting to continue their daily lives. And Randy said they did pretty well, speaking of he and Bobbi's children, but they're discouraged right now. They don't understand why it's been 9 weeks and we haven't got her back. They really believe she'll be back. I won't believe anything else. Randy Parker then hires a Houston private investigator and offers a $5,000 reward for the safe return of his wife. He said, "I feel like the FBI is working on it and they're doing everything they can do. I just figured it's one more person looking with the intention of helping them. I want to do what I can to help them. I want her back. Halloween was tough because it's a big deal for them and their mother dressing up and all of them going out." And it's also notable that in November of 1994, 2 more inmates escape prison and go on crime sprees. This is just 9 weeks after Dial escapes. How the hell does that happen? Everything at this point is haywire in this case. They can't find Dial, nor can they find Bobbi Parker. You've got Randy Parker, who is just torn up about this whole thing. I really feel horrible for this guy. He's now raising 2 daughters by himself, and nobody seems to have a clue where the hell Bobbi Parker is. But they're looking, And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap up for this week. I'll pick it up next week with, of course, Dial still on the run, Bobbi Parker in tow, people trying to figure out, did she go on her own accord or was she kidnapped? Who knew? But we're going to find out. And I'm going to tell you, it gets absolutely wild from here. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, for Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. Peace.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstring gang, Rango